Hey everyone, it's Jennifer with Lawhon Home Team and PRB, and I am here with your monthly real estate market update. We're basically going to be talking about from January up through November, and let's see what's been going on. So I'm going to start you off actually with a question. When do most listings come on the market? So typically in a normal real estate year, it's about the second quarter of each year. So we're talking April, May, and June. But we have not had a typical real estate year. So it's looking like we may actually see some more listings coming on this winter, which would be the first quarter. So watch out for January, February, and through March to see if you're noticing more listings coming up. Here's a quote from Jessica Lotz. Home sellers have historically moved when something in their lives changed, a new baby, a marriage, a divorce, or a new job. The pandemic has impacted everyone, and for many, this became an impetus to sell and make a house trade. It goes on to say from NAR, the pandemic lightly spurred occupants to shorten their home stay as tenure in the home decreased to 8 years from 10 years, according to the report. This is the largest single-year change in home tenure since NAR began collecting such data. Now let's look at this graph. This is today's homeowners are staying in their houses for an average of 8 years. That is what we're looking at. So let me just kind of explain this. It starts back in 1985, but if you look at from 87 to about 2008, the average stay in someone's house was 6 years. In 2009, it jumped up to 7, 2010, 8. But now look at the last few decades, right? Or the last few years, not decades. We're looking at 9 to 10 years, but 2021, it dropped down to 8 years. What we call that for over those last few years was a pent-up seller demand. So we're talking, we went from 9.2 average of years to 8. Another quote says that the pandemic has delayed plans for many Americans, and homeowners looking to move on to the next stage of life are no exception. Recent survey data suggests the majority of prospective sellers are actively preparing to enter the market this winter. So again, this is just kind of backing up why it looks like quarter one, right? The first quarter of 2022 may be the year that we're going to start seeing more homes coming on the listings earlier than we usually see. Let's also look at this. So we're backing everything up with some data that we're seeing, statistics, which you know I love. All right. Realtor.com has found that the majority of sellers entering the market in the next year plan to list within the next 6 months. 65% have just listed or plan to list this winter. 93% have already taken steps toward listing their home, including working with an agent. And 36% have researched the value of their home and others in their neighborhood, as well as started making repairs or decluttering. Danielle Hale says that listings rose for the second week in a row, with our recent survey data suggesting that a growing share of homeowners are potential sellers eager to find new homes. There is reason to believe this may be the start of a welcome trend, especially as we move into the colder months. Now let's talk about this graph. This is some historical perspective on today's mortgage rate. So because we do want to talk about mortgage rates, they kind of do tie in with prices of homes. So if we're looking here, let's look at 2020. These are the mortgage rates. We know that we kind of hit some historical lows that year, especially in December of 2020. But now let's look at 2021. This is the yellow graph. We were dipping down a little bit in August, but now we've been slowly steadying, going up, increasing. And if we look at these typical interest rate years that we've had, they were ranging between 3.5 and 4 on average. And that may be what we're going to start seeing as a slow climb back to those typical real estate years. Mark Fleming, I know we've used him quite a lot when we do these real estate market updates, but he says that house price appreciation is resistant to rising mortgage rates, primarily because most home sellers would rather withdraw from the market than sell at lower prices, a phenomenon we refer to as downside sticky. But now let's look at this graph about home sales and how they are impacted by rising mortgage rates. In fact, what we're seeing here is that they're not impacted. So the line graph you can see here, we start way back in 1989 going up to the year 2020. These were the mortgage interest rates, okay? And you can see in 2020 how we went down below 3.5. Now, the blue bars are the home sales, okay? So if you look at here, when you had interest rates that were rising, the home sales were not still that bad. Even when they went up to 6.41, you still had a good deal of home sales. And notice that we're not really seeing a direct correlation. So if you look at statistics, if you have like a positive correlation, that would mean, let me explain that as mortgage rates rise, there we go, I can't talk today, then you would see also home sales, right, rising. If you have a negative correlation, then as the mortgage rates rise, you would see home sales decreasing. Well, in this bar graph, we're not seeing them impacted at all. So there is no direct correlation to that. So we don't need to worry about the home sales and the mortgage rates together. Now, we always talk about mortgage rates projections. We're still on, but as you look in 2022, they're projecting that it's going to go up even more. So we are looking at possible higher interest rates, still under 4, which is great, but higher than what we've been used to over the last year. What about home price forecast? Well, if you look, they're kind of all over right now. You've got Fannie Mae projecting 7.4%, but then if you go down to NAR, they're saying 2.8%. But if we average everybody's, then we're looking at 5.1% average. So not too bad. In other words, slowing down. What about home sales forecast to increase this year, right? So we're talking about 2021 was a really good year as far as home prices and home sales. Now we're looking at 2022, and it's estimated that we're actually going to see a good forecast for our home sales. So this is 2021, and then this is the 2022 forecast. So still pretty good. In other words, we're not seeing a huge dip that we're predicting in the next year. So overall, if you look at this yellow line, 6.5 million homes were sold in 2020. So this was the forecast. It was very close, right? I mean, 6.5 is very close. And now we're projecting over here. So still pretty good. What about months inventory of homes for sale? Now, if you think about it, when you have a lot of homes on the market, that's what we call the buyer's market. So 2008, 2010. Now we're talking about seller's market. Okay, that's when we have less inventory, but more buyers. We are still in that seller's market, and we're going to keep watching it to see what happens. Let's go into sales. All right, average days on the market. Now, we've had one change. I mean, it's changed by 1 day. If you remember last month, we talked 17 days, and now we're at 18 days. So we're talking 1 extra day compared to last month. Of course, then you got Wyoming over there. That's a little off from everybody, and West Virginia, but most is average 18 days. What about existing home sales? So if you look at this, right, 2019 is that dark blue, 2020 is that medium blue, and 2021 is the lighter blue. So far, we're definitely seeing existing home sales are pretty good this year. Last year definitely beat us out, except June. June had that spike, and that's what we talked about, that we just kind of saw our spike this year happen in June. New home sales, again, we've been talking about the new home builders. They're doing very, very well. If you look at this year, they've seen growth, still not as much as last year in 2020, but they're still selling a lot. And we're seeing that also around here in the Central Florida area. Now let's talk about home prices. Existing home prices. So we always look at this. The average is 13.1%. And if you look at the South, we've seen a change since last month. We're at 16.1% here in the South. Northeast, 6.4%, so they're at the lowest compared to the other regions. Year over year change, the current change, if you think about it, we've been talking about how this hasn't been a typical year. 18%, that's pretty high. But the forecast is going to be 2.5%. In other words, kind of going back into our typical, hopefully typical real estate year, but we're going to find out. Again, housing inventory. Now, I like to kind of show you comparisons. It's changed a bit over the last month. This was the seller traffic that I showed you last month in the market update. Now let's look at it. Look at that. Much less seller traffic. So we've seen a decrease already, which is typical for the winter months, and we are getting towards our holiday month. Months inventory of homes for sale, they've been pretty steady here. If you look, we did have last year, the December and January were at the lowest. We had the least amount of inventory, but it's gone up pretty good. Now we're seeing 2.4 over the last couple months. Still not great, but not as bad as last year. Buyer demand. Now again, here's the traffic, buyer traffic from last month's video. Now let's look at buyer traffic for this month. So if you see here, we've actually seen some decrease in buyer traffic. If you look at Nevada, right, Oklahoma, there's been some decline with the buyer traffic even. Now, we also talk about average FICO scores, as always, because it's kind of important, right? If you're looking to buy a house and you're going to be using a mortgage, you want to kind of get an idea of what have been the average FICO scores, and these are for loans that have already closed. For example, conventional's been 755, FHA 676, and VA 720. All right, that leaves us now with the Orlando market update. What's been going on in our area? Okay. So, again, orange is for this year, blue is for last year. Orlando sales, we are almost at the end. So next month, in the next video, we'll have a complete picture of an entire year. If you look at what's been happening from October to November, so ever since, I'm going to start with June, we've been seeing a slight decline in sales since June. So June has definitely been our peak for this year, unless something really weird happens for December. But we've been seeing a decline. But if you notice, now this is why I want to compare too. November had more sales than last November of 2020. How about average sale price? Well, we did kind of see our peak with sale price in June, and we did talk about that. That also was reflective with the average sales. But if you see from September to October, we saw an increase in average sale price. But from October to November, we've actually seen a slight decrease in the average sale price. So anxious to see what we'll bring in December. I'm going to predict probably slightly lower as well. All right, we have our winter buyer and seller guides. They are available now. So again, if you would like a copy, they're free. They're just a PDF file that I can send to you. Just call us and I'll show you our number. So there's our number. You can also visit our website at lawhonhometeam.com and then you can fill out our contact form if you'd rather, instead of calling, fill that out. Either way, we will get back with you as soon as we can. I will see you guys next month, and I hope you guys have an amazing holiday.